You're listening to Adventures in Project Management with John Goad.
Well, hey everybody. I am excited to talk to you today about, I'm calling this a simple correction. It's when you have a problem and there's a simple solution, but you don't always see it. And it can be a straightforward approach to handling the issue or issues. But a lot of times when we're in the hunt, when we're in the battle, when we're in the middle of it, we just can't see. And so as a third-party guy, I have the opportunity to come in as a consultant or a rep, and I can see things sometimes because I'm not involved on the day-to-day basis. And so I've got a couple of case studies I want to share with you today on different projects that I had been a part of. And so the first one, I have one that didn't work so well and another one that worked well. And I guess I wanted to share both of those in contrast, and we'll kind of go from there. So the first client that I highlighted or want to highlight is they were involved or still are involved locally near me in the basically food production, agriculture sector. And they have a pretty decent presence. The firm was started years ago by one individual, and he brought together, the team. He hired some family and others to build this team. They're into real estate. They're into production consulting. They are also provide design and engineering as well for projects. And they're a good bunch of people. And so I got along real well when they came to me and said, hey, we want you to take a look at a few things. And what I found was that this firm was struggling a little bit with consistency in a few areas, certainly on some of their engineering and design, but also with selecting subcontractors and contractors for when they would go to construction or when they would actually rep construction for their clients. And they were having difficulty in qualified bids and people who were or firms that were legitimately qualified to do the work. And it sounded pretty straightforward and simple to me. I mean, my world has been construction for a long time and project management for a long time, and so it seemed to be pretty straightforward approach to how we could provide some help. So as I was engaged, I kind of got to know the team a little bit, and so that I could understand what their specific issues were with regard to having difficulty in selecting subs that were qualified or capable or whatnot. And pretty well found that they didn't have a formal selection process, and that was what I estimated initially, and so we worked with them to put together a pre-qualification process. Pretty straightforward, couple sheets that would-be bidders would have to just fill out to make certain that they were qualified, that this was a fit for them. So we developed a couple sheets that could be implemented in that way. We also worked on selection matrix. How you when you receive bids, there needs to be some consistency, and it all comes down to how you request those bids. And so in the request for proposal, also found that it was pretty loose. They would be calling people and, hey, can you bid on this? We've got some drawings, and that leaves a lot to be interpreted by the bidder if they don't have some instructions or specific parameters, and so we clean that up a little bit too. Nothing real intense or super formal, but definitely a process standard that they could operate with in the future. So we started making some progress there, and then ultimately after we developed the pre-qual forms and kind of an RFP structure for them, then we had to help them with the analysis. So bids come in and you review them and you analyze them against a standard. And so that was just a criteria sheet that we put together, a matrix that we put together to segregate fees and qualifications and other things like that. And it was all pretty straightforward. It actually took a few months to implement. By the time, I got feedback from the other personnel, and I was, coordinating with the president or the owner of the company on kind of his preferences and what he would see and what he would think. And what I found was they just had gotten busy, and as they brought people on and were training people, they also had work going on at the same time. And it's a common problem that you need to grow, but you also need to keep the lights on, and you need to keep the people fed. And so, as a result of that growth, they just didn't have time to step back and work on some of the infrastructure of the company that they needed to. And so it was really great. It was a real upbeat. Everybody was pretty excited, mostly about it. Particularly the owner. He was really excited to give some streamlining and some process to to the selection of subs. So everything was looking really great. And then it came time for implementation. The owner said, okay, as of this date, everything going out, we want to change, and John's going to help us implement. And so we received a lot of pushback from the people that had helped me. They were kind of telling me all the things that weren't working, or frustrations that they had with delivery of the contracts and all that. But then they didn't want to implement. They claimed that, they said it's just too much work. It's too much work to fill out more paper. And, from the outside, I look at that and I think, well, that's really short-sighted, because this is going to help you down the road when you're trying to manage that sub, or making certain that you've got people that are qualified. And but it was really interesting, a great deal of pushback from the team. There was a little bit of this isn't the way we've been doing it thrown in there, a lot of personal preference, and it was almost kind of a little mutiny going on. And oddly enough, the owner of the company started to waver a little bit too. And I've seen this before with other clients, but he started to lose a little bit of heart with his objective to improve, make some improvements to this process. And so I met with him and I said, listen, we've spent all this time, doing this. You have a good system. It's just, let's just train your people, and I think they can get comfortable with it. And once it's implemented, then, then we can move forward. And so he actually had me help them write some specifications for some of their, because I had mentioned before on some of their design, they had some issues as well. And I found they just didn't have basic specifications to be coupled with the design drawings. And specs are just they're a document that actually specifies, it gives the specifics, gives the detail that isn't shown on the drawings, or it enhances the drawings with additional detail. And so I helped them for another month, and we had some resources and helped put together some specs for basic sections of the engineering design that they were going to be delivering, or had been delivering. And so he felt that would really be great. Well, unfortunately, his engineering department, which was about 3 people, just adamantly opposed having specifications added to their drawings, which I thought was kind of funny, because one, they're working for this guy, and he's saying this is what I want to do to improve quality, and secondly, it's just kind of an odd thing that you could push back and say, no, I'm not going to do it. But that's kind of what happened. And so I met again with the owner. I said, listen, we're getting pushback on the solicitation process and RFP and all of that. We're getting pushback from your people on the engineering. What do you want to do? I can't force them to do it. They're not my people. Through a series of several meetings, it became clear that he was starting to back down. And I think ultimately just decided that this wasn't his hill to die on with his employees, which was really, odd to me. But, I wasn't in his shoes. I didn't have his battle day to day. And so, we parted ways, all very friendly, everybody, leave the door open, that kind of a thing. But I felt bad in that I think we worked really hard at a good plan. that just couldn't be implemented by some people that I think were just a little short-sighted or selfish, that they couldn't understand that it would have helped the entire team had they been able to put a little bit of this together. Some very simple tools to implement for a correction in course of where they were headed. And sadly, I heard later that they continued to struggle with some of the quality in the engineering realm, as well as finding and sourcing qualified contractors, which was really too bad. And that just turned into some, I think, a lot of extra cost for them and their clients, which, I never want to see. So, chalk that one up to experience, lesson learned big time. You can, you lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So that's a classic example that, we had some great tools that didn't take long to develop, that were simple, very straightforward. We're not talking military level procurement procedures, nothing like that at all. This was just consistency and documentation of that process. And it was resisted and not implemented, and sadly it didn't provide the value we had hoped. So, lesson learned. Now, I've had others that have gone really well with a simple correction, a simple solution to a seemingly overwhelming problem or a systemic problem within an organization. And so I'll use another example of another client that I had that was a large developer, and it's interesting, the large developer in the sense that they controlled and owned a lot of land in this particular state, and I'm not using names for some of these because there are some ongoing relationships, and I haven't asked for permission to use these case studies by naming these entities, but I don't think it takes away in any way from the lesson that we're talking about. But this particular developer had a lot of land holdings in an adjacent state to where I live, and but they were managed by a very small group of people, a small family that managed these large holdings. They also owned multiple construction companies and other similar associated interests as well. And so they were a pretty big deal, still are. And I was fortunate enough to meet them through another project, and one of the principals had gotten with me and said, "Listen, we're kind of having a hard time with our field guys and construction side aren't really getting along with our office people," and unfortunately, that's kind of a common thing sometimes for a variety of reasons. And so they brought me on board to start to kind of see what I could do to help with kind of making that work better. And so, it didn't take long when I started meeting with folks in the office, and then some of the superintendents in the field, that I could see why there was a rift there, and most of it had to do with communication. So, what I found was this company, or these series of companies under an umbrella, had been growing for years, just getting more work and more land holdings and larger. And when that happens, you have to bring some more people on, or if you don't bring more people on, you just continue to burden the folks that you have with more work. And as a result, that starts to kind of get a little irritation. Well, as things were growing, somebody in the office thought, well, this would be great. There's a lot of software out there that can help us do our job better. So they started purchasing licenses for all kinds of, project management software and estimating software and takeoff software and client tracking software. I mean, it was amazing to me how many licenses they held for, for their different companies. And it appeared as though nothing was talking to anything else, meaning that it wasn't integrating well. And so that caused even more frustration too. The guys in the field didn't know how to use the programs, and they didn't care to. And the people in the office were upset that they couldn't get good information from the field. And so I thought, okay, what's the simple fix here? First and foremost, we needed to scale back on the software. I mean, heck, half of it or most of it wasn't being used. There were only a few users. They weren't training people on it. It wasn't a corporate mandate that they had to use these things. It was just different people had elected to submit a purchase order to get licensed to some of this, all well-meaning, but it wasn't. There was no marching orders given to everybody that you must do this, and so as a result, it was a little bit haywire. So we started. Suggested let's just start cutting back with the licenses that just there were several that are just being carried and nobody was using. So just those are easy. We just lopped those off. And then, it all came down to, and some of you will chuckle, but it all came down to accounting. The controller, they have that title for a reason, but that was the biggest difficulty, was having, when guys in the field would spend money for their projects, and then, the receipts or the invoices or the POs would come to the accounting department. It was just a mess to try to code those to the right job. Guys weren't doing it very well. They didn't understand some of the things. So we cut back some of the licenses, and then I talked to the principal who had hired me, and I said, listen, I think we could just have some very straightforward training for your field personnel and for some of the office folks too, on just some basic project management principles. So cost control, budgeting, cost coding, those types of things. And so he gave me permission to go ahead and do several workshops. And so over the next, I think it was a month and a half, 2 months, I put on several workshops for the field and train them up on cost coding and some of that, as well as budgeting and change order management, just so they understood. You would assume that a guy in the field, a superintendent, would have the experience to or understand the change process. Well, not all the guys did, and nothing against them at all. It's just how they came up through the ranks to be promoted to superintendent. They just had never had that training or experience or whatnot. And so it was all very laid back workshop that I put on. I gave everybody a binder so they could refer to it. And what was interesting was it started the communication a little better. It helped it come to a little better level. Now, getting guys in the field to embrace things, change or more paperwork is, difficult. As I kind of explained with my last case study, even some of the folks in the office just don't like that. And trust me, I try to run from as much paper as possible. However, there is something that's crucial to good documentation. So I explained to these guys that, listen, a little bit of effort on your part is going to do so much for the office. It's going to help a ton. It really will. And then I spoke with the accounting department and basically said, listen, you're going to have to, work with these guys. They're coming up. They're learning. We've implemented a few new things just for some consistency in how costs are coded from the field and then recorded, at the accounting against each job. And I said, it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think the guys want to do it. They want to make it work. They want this anxiety to go away. And it was actually received relatively well, which was fantastic. Also, there was kind of this collective sigh of relief by everybody that they didn't have to worry about some of these software programs that nobody was using. There was almost kind of this guilt, this underlying guilt, that people knew their company was paying for it, but gosh, it's just a lot quicker for me to do what I've always done. And, instead of trying to learn this new software or whatnot. And so that was kind of an interesting little aspect to it. Now, we did have a couple of rogue people that were just opposed to any change because they felt that their way was better. And, they'd been with these companies for a very long time. And so somehow they were entitled to not have to change or not have to adapt to anything that some consultant, was going to suggest to them. And so we had to kind of navigate through a little bit of that. I think a couple people were let go as a result of that, but that was on them. The company was trying to make a commitment to becoming more streamlined and communicating better within within the different groups, and all with the intent to increase profits, but also to increase customer satisfaction, because that flows through that flows through the company as well. When there's internal struggle, it's hard to keep a happy face on outside, if you know what I mean. And so we had to work through a little bit of that, and so then as we progressed, it just continued to I think we made some really good headway. Then the principal saw that, and he thought, okay, that was a pretty straightforward fix, John. This is really great. Do you see anything else that would be a simple correction? Anything else that would be that would take us to a little a little course correct that could help us be more efficient? And so it was great as a consultant coming in and getting to have license to do that. That was just encouragement. One, to be hitting a stride, to see, to have your client see that you're adding a lot of value, and then having them ask for more is always a great feeling, and it empowers me to go do more and look harder. And so the next thing I was able to dive into was the agreements. So, on the real estate side, I think they had a pretty good setup, and I think this company had begun as a real estate company, and so I think they had spent the most time and energy there. The construction and material supplies companies and all of those came later. And back to my comment before, when you're growing fast and you have to keep the lights on and you have to service your clients, it's so easy to forget working on the infrastructure and having that infrastructure build with you, meaning everything from your accounting system to the right personnel to estimating and your project management protocol. All of that is really easy to neglect when you're just focused on growth and servicing clients. And so I was empowered to go a little further. So I did. And one of the things I had noted when we were working through the workshops was that there was not a lot of consistency with the construction contracts that this company was putting together. Again, it was kind of left up to each individual company, kind of had their own that they liked. Some of them were what I call homegrown and had been developed by somebody, or quite frankly, a lot of times there's a lot of cut and paste and copying that goes on in my industry, unfortunately. And so I don't know where some of these came, let alone if any attorney had reviewed them or not. And then there was the AIA documents, Association of Architects documents. There were several other kind of name brand agreements that were being used as well. But again, no consistency there at all. And so I got to take a look at, the different types of contract delivery, and then make recommendations to utilize specific contracts for specific types of work and specific delivery methods. So whether it was a hard bid or a negotiated contract, or this company did a fair amount of design build as well, which kicked us into a different contract. And I said, these 3 or 4 are going to be, I recommend that these are the contracts that we use. And the owner was all for it, or the principal that I'd been engaged by, he was all for this, and he said, all right, let's get into the language and make sure that they represent our interests and the interests of our clients well. And so, another month or 2, honestly, it took us to go through and make recommendations on the contracts to craft them to a favorable for these companies and fair to the client as well. And that was really fun, because to see that consistency then starting to be implemented. And these guys had a ton of work. I mean, work was just like running in the door while we were making these changes. And so it wasn't as if we had this, okay, here's a stop date and here's a start date. We literally had to start as soon as we had one of the agreements done, in terms of, the language where we liked it and everything, got it through review and everything. we had to get it out to the project managers and say, all right, you're using this one now on your next one. And then, so we kind of had a soft start, or a transition over time for these agreements. And so I'm happy to say that after we did that, and I was able to help bring a couple of the team members on board too that I had known to help effect some change. And while that didn't work out quite as well as I thought it had, what we found was we were really making great headway. But there was a point where you get to a point where I think it starts to threaten somebody's perceived or control of their company. And so we got to a point by training his people with just basic project management stuff and getting rid of the software and updating and upgrading the contracts and recruiting some really good, solid people on their team, that I think there was a little bit, he started to feel that maybe there was some nefarious, plot here that I was wanting to, take over his company or something. And that could never be, further from the truth at all. So we reached a point where it was kind of like, okay, that's as far as we're going to be able to go. But still, it was a good departure. They were, very thankful for all the work that we had done. And we did see improvements, not only in bottom line, but customer satisfaction. It was easy to see that, the whole process going through the contract negotiation and all of that, it was a lot more straightforward, a lot more consistency. Accounting, they'd probably still talk to me if I called up there today, which is fantastic. But all of that really started to work well together, which I thought was a win. Now, I can't be responsible for, after I'm long gone and if things aren't continued to be implemented or whatnot, you never know what's going to happen. But the story is that all of these issues had a very simple action that we were able to take in order to make a correction. The biggest obstacle everywhere is always the human piece to it, and we need the human aspect, obviously, in our world, in business. But that's a whole different. It seems very mechanical or technical to change a process or a contract or to educate somebody on the tenets of project management. That's almost very mechanical, very methodical, very straightforward. The human aspect that can be difficult and it can be challenging. I love that aspect of it. I enjoy the relational aspect to try to convince or persuade people that this is in their best interest, and try to walk them through the steps to seeing that, hey, a little bit of pain, a little bit of investment right now can help you do your job better and help your company, and on and on. And so that's exciting to me, and that's the piece that I like. And you'll hear more about that on this podcast as we go. But all that to say, don't be afraid if you see a huge hurdle, a huge challenge, a multifaceted issue. This last example that I used with multiple companies, multiple owners, lots of employees, lots of interests, and competing interests, you could quickly get overwhelmed in thinking, there's no way we're going to make a dent in this at all. But by breaking it down into, okay, what's most critical now and what can we approach, or just picking something to get started, to get some traction, to begin to nudge the needle in a little different direction, that's all it takes to kind of start to move. And it'll help your client or your boss or the group that you're working with. Once they start to see some traction there, once they start to see a little positive movement, it's really interesting. You'll start to get buy-in. You'll get other people behind you. Now, I was never able to get that traction with the first example that I used. But the second example, the second case study, we definitely did get some traction, which was fantastic. And that's always, gratifying to me that we've done a good job and been able to, make some impact and all of that. So just be encouraged that, positive impacts are very possible with a slight nudge. With a little bit of effort, you can certainly make big impacts. Now they have to be received. Okay, you have to get the human aspect of that so that people can receive it and see it and understand the value and then implement it. But don't be discouraged if it looks just crazy out there, for whether you're starting a business or launching a new idea, or if you've got a new position and it just seems like it's a mess. Just choose something to start working on and picking up on it. Not only will others see that you're making some progress when you get some traction, but it'll give you confidence too to continue moving forward, to continue with the next thing, from the cost codes to the contracts. That'll give you the courage and the confidence to move to that next step, and then you can start to really move into a good place and bring others along with you, and nudge that simple correction just a little bit. So, hey, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to next time, and hope that you heard something that was helpful for you here today. So we'll talk to you next time.